Unlucky for some, but not unlucky for us.
Do you know what? I was literally about to say that. You took my line.
Picked you to the post.
You picked me to the post. Do you believe in superstitions?
It's really hard to answer that because factually, like, no. I don't know if it's cultural, but I refer to things as though I do sometimes. And something might happen, I'd like spooky, it's because it's Friday the 13th or whatever. But really, if I sat down and thought about it, I probably don't believe in that, no.
I am unbelievably superstitious.
Did you listen to John Cripwell's Friday the 13th episode of the Primary Maths podcast? Because that
No.
actually gave that gave quite a lot of information about why Friday the 13th is deemed as sort of unlucky.
Can we rip John Cripwell's podcast off and you tell me some?
Call him.
Yeah. Hello. As you call him, I can only apologise for not listening to that episode yet.
We'll give him a call and we'll see if he answers.
Okay, this is great. This is totally new. I like this.
Hello, John Cripwell. You are live for our STEM Conversations introduction.
Good to know.
Good to know. Well, we were just talking about your episode about Friday the 13th because Sarah's saying she's superstitious. And I said you've got some good facts about it.
How long ago was Friday the 13th? Well, I know that you can only have 3 Friday the 13th in 1 year.
Oh.
We've already had 2.
Well, that's what we were asking. Is it February and March?
Yeah, 1 in February, 1 in March. I think we've got another one towards the end of the year, maybe October, November time.
Oh, Sarah will be on edge then.
That might be the worst one because bad luck comes in threes. If that's the third out of the year, then that must be the worst.
Statistically, Friday the 13th isn't any more unlucky than any other day.
Thank you for clearing that up, John.
Yeah, I mean, that's an average. So it may be more unlucky for Sarah, for instance. But for everybody listening, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Thanks, John. Thanks for hopping on.
John.
My pleasure.
Bye. There we go.
What a great phone call.
Well, speaking of spookiness and Friday the 13th, our episode with Paul, this episode, we end up speaking about spiders a little bit, actually. We get derailed quite frequently, but yeah, we delve into a chat about spiders in the classroom, which leads us to Paul telling us about a secret cubbyhole filled with spiders in his house because he won't throw them outside. So, naturally, I've got a spider-themed joke for you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What is a spider's favourite day of the week?
Wednesday.
Oh, right. Well done.
Is that it? I'm actually pretty impressed that I got that.
Okay, well, what about this one? Why are spiders such good computer programmers?
Something to do with the World Wide Web?
Yeah, they're good at building webs.
Oh, okay.
Brill. Well done.
Have you got one that's not web-themed? And I'll try and guess.
No, but I did find a fact about spiders that I, from a science perspective, found really interesting. But I'll be honest, it's a little bit dark to some extent. I'm going to share it with you.
Share it with me, and then we can always deal with it after.
So spiders don't use muscles to extend their legs. Okay, they instead have hydraulic pressure in their legs. Yep, so inside a spider's body, fluid is pumped into their legs to force their legs to extend. Muscles are used to pull the legs back in, but not for them to extend. They rely on this pressure system, and it's a bit like a biological hydraulic machine, which explains, and this is the part that's a little bit dark, why dead spiders have always got like curled up legs.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah, so there's science for you.
Oh, no, that is actually a pretty cool fact.
And to avoid such a thing as a dead spider, we encourage our viewers and listeners to not put them outside if you find one in your house.
Yes, because
as shared by Paul Tyler, who puts them in his understair cupboard.
Yeah. Now, in fact, we've talked a lot about spiders and spooky things. The episode is not about that at all. It's about engineering.
Yes. Yes. Don't you think it's really fascinating how so Paul lives in Scotland, he teaches in Scotland, and engineering is in the national curriculum for Scottish children, whereas in England, as we're discussing the episode, teachers are doing the best they can to fit it in the appropriate subject or the appropriate lesson, whereas our neighbours in Scotland have it as its own standalone subject, which was really interesting.
I was really surprised because one of my questions was, how can English teachers actually integrate it meaningfully? Because I do think, like myself, somebody who maybe wasn't as confident with engineering, or it wasn't an avenue that you'd explored yourself a lot, to then teach it and teach it well, on top of the demands of other subject areas in the curriculum, I probably didn't do it justice, if I'm reflecting and being honest.
Yeah. There's also that thing of, for one, at primary, teachers teach absolutely everything. So it's another thing to learn, which I only assume can feel really, really like heavy. And then at secondary, if it was in the curriculum, we would have secondary teachers that had done teacher training in engineering. And of course we don't have that because it's not a subject in the curriculum. So that was super interesting. I'm excited to see sort of what that looks like later down the line.
Yeah, and whether anything will happen with the curriculum and assessment reviews. We hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back to STEM Conversations, a podcast created to share stories, ideas and experiences shaping science, technology, engineering and maths. I'm Sarah, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Ash.
Hi! Today we're joined by Paul Tyler, whose career spans biochemist, primary teacher and now content curator at Smart STEMs, working across STEM, climate and careers education. Paul is also a science communicator, writer and speaker, and the co-founder of My Science Club. He's a primary science teaching trust fellow and currently chairs ASC Scotland. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much. That's quite the introduction. Makes me sound far grander than I actually am. It's lovely to be here. I've loved listening to the STEM Conversations podcasts so far, and I hope that we can create something today that teachers will find useful.
It is a pretty impressive introduction, I'm not going to lie. And it is really great to have you with us for this episode. Today, what we're going to be exploring is engineering in primary school. We're going to be looking at what it really means, why it matters, and how it can look in everyday classrooms. But before we get into all of those big themes, which I'm sure we're all very excited about, what have you been working on recently and what's exciting you most right now?
That's a really good question, and it got me really thinking, because I'm one of those people who gets excited by kind of anything new that comes along, and it quite often gets me in trouble because I have real problems saying no to anything. So right now I'm working with CAPE, the Climate Wise Schools Program, fabulous organisation. Their Climate Wise Schools Program is all about implementing climate change education into schools in a kind of progressive and coherent way. So doing some really, really interesting work. I'm also involved in the development of the new Scottish science curriculum. And as Ian Menzies, who's leading the science part from Education Scotland, keeps telling us, this is the most important thing we will do in our professional careers. This is an opportunity to really be there from the beginning and to hopefully create something that's going to really excite Scottish teachers over the next 10 years. And then finally, this year, I've taken over the chair of ASC Scotland as co-chair, working with Ewan Mitchell from CERC. We've got a really exciting opportunity to kind of almost redefine what ASC is for teachers and technicians across Scotland.
That's very exciting, having just been to the ASC conference in England and living in Scotland. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that, Paul. When you say you're a bit of a yes man and you struggle to say no to anything, that's not why you came on this podcast, is it? Obviously you think our podcast is marvelous.
No, absolutely not. No.
Good saves.
Yeah.
Podcasts like the series that you're creating, like the series that Tim Holford has created, are just a really exciting way of getting the message out to practitioners. We're now in an age where we're consuming media in a very different way. I don't think practitioners necessarily have the time to sit and read articles and papers anymore, whereas something like a podcast, and I consume podcasts constantly when I'm cleaning up in the kitchen, when I'm driving, and I was delighted to accept.
So now that I've finished fishing for compliments, I have seen that you've had a big career change and you've moved to Smart STEMs.
Yeah, I think first of all, it wasn't an easy decision. I've been teaching for 19 and a half years and still I'm absolutely passionate about teaching. Throughout quite a lot of my career, a lot of people have said to me, oh, you need to be, not just in one school, you need to be out, you need to be sharing your expertise or, your knowledge wider. And I've always just kind of laughed it off because I love teaching. I've been a trustee with Smart Stems for about 8 years. So I know the charity really well. I know the work that they do. So Smart Stems is a charity based in Glasgow, but working across Scotland and increasingly across the UK. At its core, it's all about ensuring that all young people get access to STEM education, no matter what their background, what their barriers are, also knowledge about STEM careers and knowledge about the pathways to get into those careers. So we do lots and lots of work where we link schools with colleges, universities, businesses, industry, and we make those links. I first came across Smart Stems. I took a group of girls to one of their events at a local college here in Glasgow, and they got to strip a car engine down. They did an amazing cybersecurity activity where they were having to stop people hacking into a bank. They got to work with a chef at the college looking at how science impacts baking. So it's those kind of real hands-on experiences that can really inspire children.
It sounds really exciting, something that I want to come to a workshop. I want to be part of that. It sounds great.
Yeah, well, we'll get you invited up. You can come up and join one of our events, either up here in Scotland or if we're running something down south.
Excuse me, down south?
Yes, down south.
So let's start with engineering in primary science then. When I've heard the word engineering, it can sometimes feel a little bit daunting or difficult to pin down what it really is in a primary context. How would you describe engineering in primary? It's not just as activities that children do, but as a way of thinking and working for children.
So my background is science, and I kind of led and taught science across the school for a number of years. So when I started branching into engineering, I had exactly those feelings. I wasn't really sure where to start. I wasn't sure how it was going to look. I just had in my head, this is just going to be messy and there's going to be mess everywhere, which I don't like in my classroom.
That surprises me.
Yeah, I know. I like a bit of control, but I learned to let go. And I think when I started exploring it and what engineering meant particularly in primary schools, I just became more and more excited about the possibilities. So engineering, a simple definition of it is it's using science and maths, knowledge and understanding to solve real life problems. At its essence, that is what engineering is. The focus, I think, in primary school particularly needs to be on the process and the way of thinking rather than a specific activity or challenge. And I think that's really important. The more open-ended you can make it, the more exciting it is and the more the children will get out of it. Engineers think very differently. They think differently to scientists. They think differently to mathematicians. And so by starting to help children develop their engineering thinking skills, you get to a point where children can tackle pretty much any challenge that's going, and they can have a go at pretty much any problem that's put in front of them. It starts off with systems thinking. Systems thinking is basically just about understanding how parts relate to a whole thing. So how things work together, how things interact in a system. If you look at the brake system on a bike, when you squeeze the brake handles, that pulls on the brake cable and that tightens the brake pads around the wheel. So you have kind of 3 parts of the system, and it's looking at how do those 3 parts fit together. So lots of activities around getting kids to take things apart, deconstruct things and see how they work. And it's quite interesting because I'm not going to be stereotypical, but if you talk, I expect, to most engineers, they will tell you that one of the things they loved doing when they were kids was taking stuff apart. It's more about deconstructing it and working out how it all fits together and how it works. The next habit of mind is adapting. It's about really giving children opportunities to try things, make mistakes, and learn from their mistakes. This was one that I found a real challenge. There's so many children now who are just scared of making mistakes.
Yeah.
They don't like making mistakes. And so they won't try something in case it goes wrong. The next bit is about problem finding. This is something I've loved developing with with kids. It's just about getting them to look around and say, right, what problems are there? What's out there that could be fixed or improved, or what's out there that doesn't work? And I don't know if you've ever had the experience of walking anywhere with an engineer, but they just constantly point out problems. You know, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, that system's dreadful. Like, you know, who came up with that? And it is just how they think. They just identify problems. The clever bit of what they do is they then can find those solutions. So the next bit, once you've identified the problem, is that creative problem solving. How do you find a new solution? You found something that doesn't work. And again, you can take the bicycle brake. The bicycle brakes that I grew up with as a child, where you had the two rubber pads that gripped on the side of the wheel, and they were great in the dry, but as soon as it was wet, they were pretty much useless. And now engineers working with bicycles have gone on and have a whole completely different disc brake system that's based on a car brake system and fitting onto a bike, and just works so much better. The next bit is visualizing. I'm absolutely fascinated by visualizing now. So this is the ability to develop a mental picture of an idea or a solution. A lot of children get to that stage in school where things become more abstract and they just cannot picture it. They cannot visualize it at all. And so there's been a lot of work done in Australia. And there's a lot of work being done at Glasgow University at the moment through something called the STEM Space Project. And what they're looking at is activities you can do in primary schools, starting children, you know, around the age of 7 and 8, that are going to help develop their spatial reasoning, their ability to create these visual pictures. I've been involved over the last couple of years with the team at Glasgow University, and we've trialled a lot of their ideas, their resources in school, and the impact is massive. And I think this is all about, in primary school, this is all about giving children space and encouraging them to build something, not be too precious about it, test it. Does it do what it's supposed to do? No. Let's build it again. What bit of it do we need to improve? Which bit does it not do? It's amazing because it's really, really powerful. And they get on to, you know, their third or their fourth build, and all of a sudden they go, oh, wow, now it really does what I want it to do. So it takes time. And I think that's one of the things that can quite often put teachers off, is the amount of time that you need to put into something. But once you get there, it's fantastic, and it just sets children up for, you know, the next stage on their engineering journey.
What kinds of classroom approaches do you think limit engineering learning in primary, even when the intentions are good?
Yeah, and this was a really interesting question. It's got me really thinking. I think the first thing that can really limit it is those step-by-step activities, just taking a class through something, right? We're all going to do this together, and then we're all going to do this, and we're all going to end up with something that looks exactly the same. I think that is kind of it's almost the antithesis of engineering. Anything that takes away opportunities for children to collaborate, talk about what they're doing, anything that means children don't have the opportunity to explore and test and make a mess, is going to hold them back, is going to limit them.
The fact that you give them that free rein and then allow them to choose the materials that they so wish, must be so much high quality discussion within there about why a certain material isn't working, or what else would work, why it wouldn't work. And I can imagine that develops a lot between children and their peers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of my role in the classroom is just asking questions and just dropping in the occasional hand grenade. Why not try it? Then just stepping back and letting the children explore the conversations that they have between themselves, which it's really, really difficult to capture. The richness and the depth of the conversations that they have is really important.
Engineering isn't named explicitly within the English national curriculum, and it doesn't always sit neatly in just one subject. I know many teachers are already developing engineering thinking through their work, but for you, what does really good engineering work look like in primary?
Yes, it's a really good question, because up here in Scotland, it is in our curriculum. It's explicitly mentioned.
That's interesting.
Across our curriculum. And I'm always really impressed at my colleagues down in England who have found a way of despite the fact it's not explicit in the national curriculum, found a way of teaching it, which is brilliant. I think the first thing is that the engineering habits of mind have an impact across the curriculum. They are ways of thinking that can have a real impact in a variety of areas. Good engineering education needs time. It's not something you can do in an afternoon. It's not something you can do in a short block. It takes time to develop the ways of thinking. We talk quite a lot about kind of a low entry point and a high challenge. You have a low entry point whereby all pupils can get some success fairly quickly, but a high challenge threshold, I suppose, whereby those children with a real aptitude for it can really go on and push the boundaries and push the limits. So I think that's really important. It has to be embedded in real life, and I think you mentioned that back at the start. Real life problems that are relevant to the children. There's no point trying to get them to solve problems about transporting bananas around the world, because it's not in their sort of sphere of understanding yet. One of the ones that I quite often start with when I'm doing it is the problem of children sharing desks in a class, and their stuff's all over the place, and the person next to them keeps taking their pencil and their ruler because they're not sure if it's theirs or not. And so one of the solutions they quite often come up with is to design and then build a desk tidy. And so it's something that's very real to them. They'll always come up to you and, do you think this is going to work? And I'm like, I don't know if it's going to work. Just try it and see. And that is just fabulous. We always make a real point of celebrating our failures. I always say to classes, it's really important that you tell us when something hasn't worked, because that's going to stop somebody else doing that. Yeah. Because they'll have learned from your mistake. I think the final bit about what good engineering looks like is around using the design process. So this idea of defining a problem, doing a little bit of research. Is there already something out there that is a solution? Imagining possible solutions. And that's one of my favorite bits. It's basically just get groups of children to sit and they just come up with as many completely off the wall solutions as they can. They test it, improve it, back to create, and then round that process until they've got something that they're really happy with. I think it's, there's lots to it. And there's lots that we've talked about this morning, but for me, it's really about time. You've got to be able to give it the time that it needs to develop it properly.
Well, we met with Jane Koyani, who's head of STEM at Edinburgh University. She said, failure is productive. And it stayed with me since we met her in one of the very first episodes. Do you remember that, Sarah?
Yeah, it was such a good episode.
It's a massive problem in the scientific community. People do not publish their failures. And it's a huge problem, because what you find is scientists across the world, researchers across the world are just doing the same things over and over again, when actually someone could have told them in 5 minutes that doesn't work. You can't do it like that. So so celebrating failure and communicating failure is so important in so many walks of life. It's a real skill that children get through engineering. Not being afraid of telling people about failure. Yeah. There was a podcast I was listening to the other day, and they were talking about the embarrassment that people feel when they have been scammed, and the fact that when they've been scammed, they don't talk about it. And the fact that they don't talk about it actually leads to, other people.
Oh, I got scammed 2 weeks ago.
Oh no, did you?
And I was so embarrassed.
That's literally where we're laughing.
I was saying, what someone as switched on as me, there must have been something else. It must have been this, and this that made me believe this scam. Yeah, this is very relatable.
It is, and it's a big problem, because we are, as human nature, to not want to think about our failures and things and be embarrassed about them. But if we don't, and we don't share that, other people are then going to just make the same mistakes and fall into the same thing. So not something to be ashamed of.
And now I've verbalized it in the podcast, and I'm not going to cross it out.
And I'm not ashamed. It's hard to be that vulnerable and be like, right, I've tried all these things, I've put all this effort in, all this work in, and none of it worked. It's difficult to
Yeah.
admit that. It's your pride and ego, isn't it, more than anything else?
And there's a fantastic quote, I think, from Michael Jordan about, the number of winning shots that he has missed in his career.
Yeah.
But he said no one ever talks about those because they just focus on the winning shots that he made. Everybody in every walk of life is going to experience failure, and there's plenty of research out there that shows that the more failure you experience, the more successful you're going to be in the end. So we need to develop that resilience in children that they don't mind failure. And engineering is a brilliant vehicle for doing that.
My new mantra. I'm comfortable failing.
Perfect.
Yeah. Engineering is often described as purposeful problem solving, where pupils take ownership of designing, making, testing, and improving ideas. What features really matter if engineering is going to support meaningful learning in primary rather than just a finished product?
We want to get away from that finished product idea, because if you want a nice finished product, well, you just do step by step, draw along kind of approach to it, and we'll all just do the same thing and end up with the same thing. You can't just give children a problem and expect them to solve it. There needs to be an element of teaching them techniques, how to use tools, either at the start or as they use those throughout. And I always go back here and use the example of the box. One of the first things that I realized when I started teaching engineering was that there were a lot of the skills that I assumed children would have that they just didn't. Every child I was working with, I taught them how to make a really simple box out of cardboard. Okay. And we started off by drawing on a piece of cardboard. We drew the net of our box, and that was a challenge in itself, because just getting them to measure, draw straight lines, construct the net.
I can imagine that was really, really, really hard.
If I'm honest, I was blown away by the number of children who just didn't really know how to use a ruler properly. They'd only ever really used a ruler for underlining.
What age were the students doing this?
So this was with 9 to 11-year-olds.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. But it was brilliant. And then I had big posters on my wall, basically for sketching, drawing, cutting. We came up with a whole series of steps. So with cutting, it was really simple things like, the hand that you hold your scissors in should be anchored on the desk. It doesn't float around in midair. You only ever cut facing away from you, and you turn the bit of cardboard so the scissors don't move. But you still can't fold it into a box. It's still a flat bit of cardboard. So you then need to score along all the lines where you're going to fold it. So we went through a whole process of, right, how do we score? They then fold it up into the box, and then there was we had to do a whole lot of work around using glue effectively. And how do you glue something together so that it is actually going to stick? And that was another whole block. But each of these was skill that I never needed to teach again.
Yeah.
And the children could then apply these skills and these techniques to absolutely anything. So we got to the end and we had our little box made, and I then said to children, right, I've taken you through it step by step. We've got our box. Now I want you to go and do it again, and I want you to go and make another box. Some of them made a box then with a lid. Some of them made a box that had an insert in it, so the box was split into compartments. Wee boy he was actually one of the younger pupils, he was only 9, made a box with a lid and a little lock, a little catch that locked the lid shut.
Okay.
And by this point, I was sort of starting to realize that this was a really important starting point, because by learning how to make this box, the children all of a sudden just had a whole range of skills that they could now apply to making pretty much anything. Obviously, in primary schools, we're a little bit restricted as well in terms of the tools that we have available to us, in terms of the materials that we have available to us. So it's just about being creative with that. But I think you can do some seriously high quality engineering just with cardboard. I think we were at one point we were going through about 3,500 cereal boxes a year, and with our cardboard engineering.
I do feel in secondary, don't get me wrong, we do have challenges. However, we so take for granted that the students come to us able to use scissors and a ruler, etc. At least to some extent, because you're putting all the graft in at primary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I take my hats off to the early years, teachers and staff, because that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah.
It's quite surprising, I think, sometimes, because I found that you'd planned this sort of great progression of work, this idea of something that you wanted to do, and actually what you spent your whole time doing was using scissors, or like you said, understanding how to glue correctly or things like that, and you didn't venture onto anything further than that because you just saw that the children couldn't grasp that skill at the moment, and it took such a long time. It shocked me pretty much every time. I was like, oh, we're gonna have to stop here, we're not gonna go any further, but using these scissors or a ruler or anything else.
We used to have it with stopwatches, if we were timing something in secondary, and you just assume, we always assume they'll know, just press the green button and then press it to pause, but they don't, and we lost so much data from students not being able to use the stopwatch. Yeah,
absolutely.
So research and practice both suggest that engineering works best when it's coherent and sustained rather than dependent on individual lessons or events. So I think this is more for our colleagues that are listening in England then, because Paul, you said that it is mentioned explicitly within the Scottish curriculum. But what could help schools move towards more of a joined up approach to engineering in primary?
Yeah, I think the progression is really important. So think about, we've just talked about sort of skills progressions. What does that look like in your school? At what age are children first taught to use scissors, and through what contexts? And then how are their skills using scissors developed as they move through the school? Are they just taught how to use them basically and then it's forgotten about? I spent quite a long time buying various different cardboard cutting tools and testing them and finding out what worked best, and eventually discovered these fabulous canary cutters online. They're pretty much completely safe for the children to use. They cut corrugated cardboard beautifully, really, really clean cuts. And so for the older ones, that was a real progression in terms of then what they were able to create, because they were now able to make much, much more accurate and intricate cuts. So thinking about in your school what that progression looks like.
Do you love how engrossed and invested we are in neat cardboard cutting? We're like, wow, yeah, neat cardboard cutting. It's important.
It's a game changer. It really is. Because corrugated card, it's a perfect building material in primary schools. You can get tons and tons of it for free. It comes into schools every day. It's really difficult to cut with scissors.
It's really hard.
When I'm cutting big bits of it, I was always using a Stanley knife. You can't let kids use a Stanley knife.
No.
There was some brilliant stuff from Cleeps a few years ago where they were talking about the safety of junior hacksaws, and they said it would take you about 8.5 minutes to saw your finger off with one of these. And that was their kind of, these are really safe for you to use. The canary cutters are the same. So I can quite happily have a class of 30 kids. Half of them are away with their canary cutters, and I know that at the very, very worst, they're going to get a cut that's a bit like a paper cut, and that's it.
Paper cuts can be brutal.
I hate.
And a cardboard cut from freshly cut corrugated cardboard is even worse.
I wonder how many minutes it would take with a piece of cardboard to cut your finger off.
Your finger off. You'd be going for a while because it blunts quite quickly. You'd need to keep changing the bit of cardboard to saw away at it.
someone would notice and say, please stop doing that.
Well, you'd like to think so, yeah. Like the kids, they'll get little cuts and things on their hands, and they just get used to it, and they actually stop coming and telling you about it. I mean, the number of times in class that I've cut myself, and the kids will come over and they're like, "Oh, you've cut yourself," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's just a little cut. It's fine. Let's just get on with it."
Yeah. Prepare them for the world of Bunsen burners.
My dad's an engineer as well, and every time I see him, it's slightly worse than a paper cut, but every time I see him, he's got a new bruise on one of his nails because he's trapped his fingers in something or he's done something like that. But it's every time I come round, it's like a full set of bruised nails at the minute.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next question. What role do subject leaders and senior leaders play in protecting the quality of engineering experiences as schools develop the work?
Yeah, so this I think is this underpins everything. I've been incredibly fortunate that my head teacher at school was really, really supportive of what I was doing, and was really happy to kind of give me almost free rein to develop it how I saw fit. You have to have school leaders who are behind you when you're developing this and are willing to take a few risks and willing to accept that it's going to take time to develop and to embed these skills. The more and more time I spent in teaching, the more I realized that a lot of the methods and approaches that we use in teaching, we use purely because they're the quickest way to get from A to B, and they're the quickest way to get information into a child's head that child can use. But that doesn't mean they're always the best way. You have to do it the messy way. You have to let children explore. You have to let children make mistakes. There are pressures on school leaders, and I think particularly probably more so in England than in Scotland, with SATs and things that we don't have to worry about in Scotland. And so it takes a little bit of bravery from a school leader to say, actually, we're gonna prioritize this. And I think if you were to talk to every teacher who is doing something outstanding in their school, they will all say to you that it's a school leader who is empowering them to do that and giving them the space to do that.
Yeah.
The other bit of it, I suppose, is about that I haven't really touched on, is about the importance of wider engagement. So bringing visitors into the schools, getting out on visits if you can to see engineers in action. I'm yet to come across an engineer who doesn't love talking about what they do. Every engineer who comes in always wants to know, can I do something practical with the kids? And I'm like, yeah, of course you can. So I could have done that, but it would have had about 2% of the impact that it's had of you coming in and doing it.
Oh, yeah. It's like when there's a bee that flies through the window, or a cat walks outside the window, and everything that you've planned goes to complete mess because the kids are just obsessed with that.
When you're talking about bees and wasps coming into your room, so I've done a whole lot of work this year on outdoor education and links with nature. One of the biggest changes I found was that when a wasp or a bee flew into the room, instead of the children all being terrified, they were just fascinated by it.
Oh,
Didn't get that kind of screaming and shouting, but you got a completely different sort of disruption because they were just fascinated by it, and they were all like, come and land on my desk.
I've only ever experienced carnage, like pure carnage throughout the room if a bee flies in.
There's no spiders. They were fine with bees and wasps because the science labs in secondary have got really high ceilings and loads of windows, so they just fly in, buzz about really high and buzz out. If there was a spider, because I didn't want the kids to kill the spider because they would instinctively be like, I had to go and I had to face my fears every time and physically hold the spider and take it to safety so that the kids wouldn't kill it. That was always quite an uproar.
And were you pretending you weren't frightened?
Yeah, I was trying to pretend really brave the whole time, but I've got a phobia of spiders and I don't know where it came from.
No, it's one of those weird, totally irrational things, isn't it? But
yeah.
I'm just gonna check. My wife's working from home today. I'm just make sure she's not listening. So we get big wolf spiders in the house, but I hate putting them outside, particularly in the winter, because I know that
Kills them
it
anyway, doesn't it?
kills them really quickly. So I pretend I'm putting them outside, but I put them all in the cupboard under the stairs. So there's a
No.
whole of quite enormous wolf spiders that quite cozily live in the cupboard under the stairs that my family don't know about.
You are going to be in trouble.
Yeah, probably cut that bit out.
So to end our conversation, we like to give listeners one key takeaway from each episode. What's one idea, perspective, or piece of advice you'd love listeners to carry with them after this conversation?
Yeah, brilliant. I think for me, it would be brave. Challenge your comfort zone, embrace the messiness, because that is such an important part of the process. So yeah, get out there, be brave, and enjoy it, because it's really, really rewarding.
Thank you, Paul, so much for joining us on this episode.
Yeah, it's been brilliant hearing your insights into engineering in primary, and we really appreciate you sharing your experience and your thinking.
Oh, not at all. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been I've loved it. The questions that you'd put to me made me really think about every sort of step of what I'd done. But yeah, just really enjoyed talking about it, and I really hope it will be useful for schools and teachers going forward.
And thank you to everyone listening. Don't forget to follow STEM Conversations wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more stories and ideas shaping science, technology, engineering and maths.